Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and I know exactly how you're feeling right now. You want to speak English fluently, but sometimes the words just don't come out the way you want them to. You're not alone in this journey. Today, we're going to talk about practical tips that will help you speak English with more confidence. I want you to grab your headphones, find a comfortable spot, and let's dive into something that will change how you approach English speaking forever. You know what I love about this community? It's that we all share something so beautiful together. We all have this dream, this desire to express ourselves freely in English. And right now, as you're listening to my voice, I want you to know that I understand exactly where you are in your journey. Maybe you're sitting at your desk after a long day of work. Maybe you're walking in the park, or maybe you're lying in bed before going to sleep. Wherever you are, whatever time of day it is, you've made a choice to invest in yourself today. That decision alone tells me everything I need to know about you. You're someone who doesn't give up, someone who believes in growth, someone who knows that speaking English fluently is not just a dream, but a goal you can actually achieve. I remember when I first started learning languages myself. There was this feeling, this mix of excitement and fear that would wash over me every time I thought about having a real conversation. You probably know this feeling too. It's that moment when you hear English being spoken around you and you understand most of what's being said. But when it comes time to respond, your mind goes blank. Or maybe you do speak, but the words come out differently than you planned, and you feel frustrated with yourself. I've been there, and I want you to know that what you're feeling is not only normal, but it's actually a sign that you're growing. Think about it for a moment. The fact that you're here, listening to this podcast, means you've already taken the most important step. You've decided that you're not going to let fear stop you from becoming the English speaker you want to be. That's courage, and courage is what separates people who dream from people who achieve. Every single person who speaks English fluently today was once exactly where you are right now. They had the same doubts, the same fears, the same moments of frustration. But they kept going. And that's exactly what you're doing too. Now, before we go any deeper into today's episode, I want you to do something for me. I want you to take a deep breath and really think about why you want to speak English fluently. Is it because you want to travel the world and connect with people from different cultures? Maybe you want to advance in your career, or perhaps you want to watch movies and understand every joke without subtitles. Whatever your reason is, hold on to it. That reason is your fuel, your motivation when things get challenging. And trust me, there will be challenging moments, but those moments are not roadblocks, they're stepping stones. Here's something I want to share with you that might surprise you. The biggest secret to speaking English fluently isn't about knowing every single word or understanding every single rule. It's about connection. It's about expressing yourself, sharing your thoughts, and communicating with others. When you shift your focus from being perfect to being understood, everything changes. Suddenly, the pressure lifts, and speaking becomes less about performance and more about sharing who you are. I've seen this transformation happen so many times with people in our community. Just last week, I received a message from someone who told me that 6 months ago, they couldn't even introduce themselves in English without their heart racing. Now they're having conversations with colleagues, making friends online, and even dreaming in English sometimes. What changed? It wasn't that they suddenly became perfect. It was that they stopped waiting for perfection and started practicing with purpose. You see, fluency isn't a destination you arrive at one day. It's a journey you're on every single day. Every time you listen to English, every time you try to say something new, every time you make a mistake and learn from it, you're becoming more fluent. Right now, as you're listening to me speak, your brain is working. It's processing sounds, recognizing patterns, and building connections. You might not feel it happening, but it is. This very moment is part of your fluency journey. And here's what I really want you to understand today. You don't need to wait until you're perfect to start speaking. You don't need to study for years before you have your first conversation. You can start right now, today, with exactly the English you already have. Because here's the truth that nobody talks about enough. You already know so much more English than you give yourself credit for. You understand me right now, don't you? You're following my thoughts, connecting with my words, and that's incredible. That's proof that you're already on your way. The The people who become truly fluent in English are not the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who make mistakes and keep going anyway. They're the ones who speak even when they're not sure if they're saying everything perfectly. They're the ones who choose progress over perfection, every single time. And that's exactly the kind of English speaker I know you can become, because you're here, you're listening, and you're ready to take action. So as we continue with today's episode, I want you to listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. Let these ideas sink in, let them inspire you, and most importantly, let them give you the confidence to know that fluent English is not just possible for you, it's inevitable if you keep showing up for yourself the way you're showing up today. Before we dive deeper into today's tips, I need you to do something that will help both of us on this English fluency journey. If this episode is already helping you feel more confident about your English speaking abilities, please hit that like button right now. Your like tells me that this content is valuable to you, and it helps other English learners discover our community. And if you haven't subscribed to the English Talk community yet, click that subscribe button because I share practical English fluency tips like these every week, and you don't want to miss any strategies that could transform your speaking confidence. Now, here's something really important I want you to do. In the comments below, share one English speaking challenge you're facing right now, or tell us about a recent moment when you successfully used English and felt proud of yourself. Maybe you ordered food in English, helped someone with directions, or understood a movie scene without subtitles. Your story will inspire other community members who are on the same journey, and it reminds all of us that we're not alone in this process. Plus, I read every single comment and often create episodes based on the challenges and successes you share with me. So take 30 seconds right now to leave a comment about your English speaking experience, because your story matters and it helps build our supportive community. Let me tell you about Maria from Madrid. She studied English for years but froze every time someone spoke to her in English. Sound familiar? You know what I'm talking about? That moment when you understand everything but can't respond. The good news is that this fear is completely normal, and more importantly, it's something you can overcome. You don't need perfect grammar to communicate effectively. You need courage and the right mindset. Maria's story is so similar to what many of you have shared with me over the years. She would spend hours every day reading English books, watching movies with subtitles, and even doing online exercises. Her vocabulary was impressive, her understanding was excellent, but the moment someone asked her a simple question like, "How was your weekend?" her mind would go completely blank. She would stand there knowing exactly what she wanted to say in her head, but somehow the words just wouldn't come out of her mouth. Does this sound like something you've experienced? I bet it does, because this is one of the most common challenges English learners face around the world. What Maria didn't realize at first was that fear was playing a much bigger role in her English journey than she thought. It wasn't that she didn't know the words. It wasn't that she hadn't studied enough. The real problem was that every time she tried to speak, her brain would flood with worry. What if I say something wrong? What if they don't understand me? What if I sound stupid? What if my accent is too strong? These thoughts would race through her mind so fast that they would literally block her ability to speak. And the more this happened, the more afraid she became of speaking English at all. I want you to understand something really important here. This fear you might be feeling, this nervousness that shows up when you need to speak English, it's not a sign that you're bad at English. It's actually a sign that English matters to you. Think about it. You don't get nervous about things you don't care about. The reason your heart starts beating faster when someone speaks to you in English is because deep down, you really want to succeed. You want to connect with that person. You want to express yourself clearly. That fear is actually love in disguise. It's your brain's way of saying that this is important to you. But here's where things get interesting. Fear has this sneaky way of making us believe things that aren't true. Fear tells us that we need to be perfect before we can speak. Fear tells us that everyone will judge us if we make a mistake. Fear tells us that native speakers never struggle with words or never say things in a confusing way. But I'm here to tell you that none of these things are true. Native speakers make mistakes all the time. They forget words, they say things in weird ways, they sometimes even use the wrong word completely. And you know what happens? People still understand them. Conversations still continue. Life still goes on. Maria's breakthrough moment came when she realized something powerful. She was at a coffee shop in Madrid, and she overheard two English tourists trying to order. They were clearly struggling, pointing at the menu, using simple words, even making some mistakes with their pronunciation. But the Spanish barista understood them perfectly and was being so patient and helpful. Maria watched this interaction and suddenly understood that communication is not about speaking perfectly. It's about connecting with another person, sharing information, and making yourself understood. Those tourists got exactly what they wanted, even though their Spanish wasn't perfect. That's when Maria decided to change her approach completely. Instead of focusing on what could go wrong when she spoke English, she started focusing on what could go right. Instead of worrying about mistakes, she started thinking about connection. Instead of trying to sound like a native speaker, she decided to sound like herself speaking English. And you know what happened? Within a few weeks, she was having real conversations with English speakers, and they were wonderful interactions. This shift in mindset is something that every successful English speaker has made at some point. They stop seeing English speaking as a test they might fail and start seeing it as an opportunity to connect with someone new. They stop waiting for the perfect moment when they know every word and start creating moments of connection with the words they already know. They stop being afraid of being misunderstood and start trusting that most people want to understand them and will work with them to make communication happen. I want you to think about this for a moment. When someone speaks to you in your native language and they're clearly learning, how do you react? Do you judge them harshly for every mistake they make? Do you get impatient when they can't find the right word? Or do you try to help them? Do you appreciate their effort? Do you feel happy that they're trying to communicate with you in your language? I'm willing to bet that you're kind, patient, and helpful. Well, guess what? Most English speakers are exactly the same way when you speak to them in English. The truth is, when you speak English with someone, you're giving them a gift. You're sharing part of yourself, you're making an effort to connect with them in their language, and you're showing respect for their culture and their way of communicating. That's beautiful, and most people recognize it as such. They're not sitting there waiting for you to make mistakes so they can judge you. They're usually impressed that you're speaking a second language at all, because many of them only speak one language themselves. Fear also makes us forget about something really important: context. When you're having a conversation in English, the other person usually has a pretty good idea of what the conversation is about. If you're in a restaurant, they know you're probably talking about food or drinks. If you're asking for directions, they know you're trying to get somewhere. If you're at work, they know you're discussing work-related topics. This context helps communication so much that even if you don't say something perfectly, people can usually figure out what you mean. Maria discovered this when she started allowing herself to speak imperfectly. She would say things like, "I want to go to museum tomorrow," instead of, "I would like to go to the museum tomorrow," and people understood her perfectly. She would say, "The weather is very hot today, no," instead of using the correct question form, and conversations flowed beautifully. She realized that her fear had been protecting her from something that wasn't actually dangerous at all. Here's something that changed everything for one of my listeners, Pierre from Paris. Instead of trying to have deep conversations, he started with simple daily activities. He would describe his breakfast in English, talk about the weather, or simply say what he was doing at that moment. You can do this too. Start with one sentence about your day right now. Don't worry about perfection, just start speaking. Pierre's transformation really opened my eyes to something powerful about how we learn to speak English naturally. When he first contacted me, he was so frustrated because he had been studying English for 3 years, but every time he tried to speak, he would attempt these complex conversations about philosophy, politics, or deep personal topics. Can you imagine? Here he was, still building his confidence with basic English, but trying to discuss the meaning of life with native speakers. Of course, he felt overwhelmed and discouraged. It was like trying to run a marathon when you've only just learned how to walk. But Pierre was smart. He realized that he was setting himself up for failure by aiming too high too quickly. So he made a decision that completely changed his English speaking journey. He decided to start with the simplest things possible. And I mean really simple. He started by describing what he was eating for breakfast every morning. Not to anyone else at first, just to himself. He would wake up, make his coffee and toast, and then say out loud, "I am drinking coffee. The coffee is hot. I like this coffee. Now I am eating toast with butter. You might think this sounds too basic, maybe even silly. But here's what Pierre discovered, and what I want you to understand too. When you practice with simple things, you're building something incredibly important. You're building confidence. You're training your mouth to make English sounds. You're getting comfortable with the rhythm of English. You're proving to yourself that you can express thoughts in English, even if they're simple thoughts. Every single sentence you say in English is a victory, no matter how basic it might seem. Pierre told me that after just 1 week of describing his breakfast every morning, something magical started happening. The words began flowing more naturally. He didn't have to think so hard about each word. He could focus on expressing his thoughts instead of struggling to remember vocabulary. And then he started expanding. He began describing his lunch, then his dinner. He would talk about the weather when he looked out the window. Today is sunny. I can see blue sky. It feels warm outside. Simple sentences, but they were his sentences, expressing his observations about his world. What I love about Pierre's approach is that he made English part of his real life instead of keeping it separate as something he only studied. When you describe what you're actually doing, eating, seeing, or feeling, you're connecting English to your real experiences. This creates much stronger memories in your brain than just memorizing random sentences from textbooks. Your brain starts to understand that English is not just academic exercise, it's a tool for expressing your real thoughts about your real life. After a month of this daily practice, Pierre decided to take it one step further. He started narrating his actions as he did them throughout the day. While brushing his teeth, he would think, "I am brushing my teeth. The toothpaste tastes like mint. My teeth feel clean." While walking to work, he would observe, "I am walking to the office. There are many cars on the street. The morning air is fresh." He turned his entire day into English practice without adding any extra time to his schedule or doing any formal studying. This is something you can start doing right this very moment. Look around you right now. What do you see? What are you doing? Try saying one simple sentence about it in English. Maybe you're sitting at your desk and you can say, "I am listening to a podcast." Or perhaps you're walking and you can think, "I am walking and listening to Julia." It doesn't matter if the sentence is simple. What matters is that you're using English to describe your reality. Pierre shared something really interesting with me after he had been doing this for a few months. He said that English started feeling less like a foreign language and more like another way of thinking. Because he was using it to describe his daily experiences, it began to feel natural and normal. He wasn't translating from French to English anymore. He was thinking directly in English about the simple things in his life. This is exactly what happens when you practice consistently with real situations instead of artificial exercises. The beauty of starting small is that it builds momentum naturally. Pierre began with describing his breakfast, but after 6 months, he was having full conversations with English speakers about all sorts of topics. The difference was that he had built a strong foundation of confidence by proving to himself over and over again that he could express himself in English. Every single day, he had evidence that English was possible for him, that it was natural for him, that it was part of who he was. I want you to understand that starting small doesn't mean staying small forever. It means giving yourself the gift of success every single day. When you can successfully describe your morning coffee in English, you feel good about your English abilities. When you feel good about your abilities, you're more likely to try describing your lunch. When you can describe your lunch, you feel even more confident, and you might try talking about your plans for the evening. This positive cycle builds on itself, and before you know it, you're speaking English about all kinds of topics. Pierre also discovered something that many of my listeners have found helpful. He realized that simple doesn't mean boring. Even basic sentences can be interesting when they're about your real life. "I am drinking coffee" becomes more engaging when you add, "I am drinking coffee and it tastes delicious today." "The weather is nice" becomes more personal when you say, "The weather is nice and it makes me feel happy." You're still using simple language, but you're expressing genuine thoughts and feelings. One of the most powerful things about Pierre's approach is that it removes pressure completely. When you're describing your breakfast, there's no wrong answer. You're not trying to impress anyone or prove anything. You're simply practicing the skill of putting your thoughts into English words. This relaxed state of mind is perfect for learning, because your brain isn't fighting against stress and anxiety. You can focus entirely on the joy of expression and communication. What Pierre taught me, and what I want to share with you, is that every expert was once a beginner who didn't give up. Every fluent English speaker started with simple sentences just like the ones I'm encouraging you to try. The difference between people who become fluent and people who stay stuck is not talent or natural ability. The difference is consistency and the willingness to start where they are instead of where they think they should be. Anna from Berlin discovered something amazing. She started talking to herself in English while doing everyday tasks. When she was cooking, she would say things like, "I am cutting vegetables," or "the water is boiling." You might feel silly at first, but this technique works incredibly well. Your brain starts to think in English naturally. Try it when you're alone at home. Anna's discovery came at a time when she was feeling really frustrated with her English progress. She had been taking classes for 2 years, she could read English books fairly well, and she understood most of what she heard in movies and podcasts. But when it came to speaking, she still felt like there was this huge gap between understanding English and actually producing it. She would hear English in her head, but when she opened her mouth, it felt like the words had to travel such a long distance from her thoughts to her voice. That's when she stumbled upon something that changed everything for her. It happened on a regular Tuesday evening when Anna was making dinner in her small Berlin apartment. She was chopping onions for a soup recipe, and for some reason, maybe because she had been listening to English podcasts all day, she found herself thinking about what she was doing in English instead of German. Without really planning it, she started saying her thoughts out loud. "I am chopping onions. These onions are making my eyes water. Now I need to heat the oil in the pan." She felt a little strange talking to herself, but something about it felt right, natural even. What Anna discovered that evening was that self-talk in English creates a completely different kind of practice than any other method she had tried. When you talk to yourself, there's no pressure to impress anyone. There's no fear of judgment. There's no worry about whether the other person will understand you. It's just you, your thoughts, and the English language coming together in the most relaxed way possible. This relaxed state is actually perfect for learning, because your brain can focus entirely on the process of turning thoughts into English words. The beautiful thing about Anna's approach is that it fits naturally into life without requiring any extra time. She was going to cook dinner anyway. She was going to clean her apartment anyway. She was going to get dressed and brush her teeth anyway. By adding English narration to these activities, she turned every single day into English practice. And unlike formal study sessions, this practice felt effortless because it was woven into activities she was already doing. Anna told me that within just a few days of starting this self-talk practice, she noticed something remarkable happening. The gap between thinking and speaking was getting smaller. When she was folding laundry and saying things like, "This shirt is wrinkled," or "I need to put the socks in pairs," the English words were coming more quickly and easily. It was like her brain was creating a direct pathway from thoughts to English expression, bypassing the translation process that had been slowing her down. What's really fascinating about self-talk is that it allows you to practice English in a completely authentic way. When Anna was cooking and saying, "The garlic smells wonderful," or "I think I need more salt," these weren't sentences from a textbook. These were her genuine thoughts about her real experience in that moment. This authenticity creates much stronger neural pathways in your brain because you're connecting English to actual emotions, sensations, and observations. After a week of cooking with English commentary, Anna started expanding this practice to other parts of her day. When she was getting ready in the morning, she would narrate her routine. "I am washing my face with cold water. The water feels refreshing. Now I am brushing my teeth. I like the taste of this toothpaste." When she was cleaning her apartment on weekends, she would describe what she was doing. "I am vacuuming the living room carpet. There is a lot of dust under the sofa. The vacuum cleaner is quite loud." One of the most powerful aspects of Anna's self-talk practice was that it helped her become comfortable with her own voice speaking English. Many English learners avoid speaking because they don't like how they sound, or they're self-conscious about their accent. But when you're alone, talking to yourself, you can get used to hearing your own voice speaking English without any external pressure. Anna found that the more she heard herself speaking English during her daily activities, the more natural and normal it began to feel. Anna also discovered that self-talk is perfect for practicing the rhythm and flow of English. When you're describing what you're doing in real time, you naturally speak at a normal pace. You're not overthinking each word or pausing to construct perfect sentences. You're just flowing with your thoughts and activities. This natural pace helps you develop the rhythm that makes English sound fluent and conversational. What I love about Anna's story is how she made this practice completely her own. She started incorporating her feelings and opinions into her self-talk. Instead of just saying, "I am washing dishes," she would say, "I am washing dishes and I don't really enjoy this task, but the warm water feels nice on my hands." Instead of just, "I am choosing clothes for today," she would say, "I am choosing clothes for today, and I think I want to wear something comfortable because it looks like it might rain." This emotional component of self-talk is incredibly powerful for language learning. When you express your real feelings and opinions in English, even when you're alone, you're teaching your brain that English is not just a school subject or a skill to practice. English becomes a language for expressing who you are, what you think, and how you feel about the world around you. This emotional connection makes the language stick much better in your memory. Anna shared with me that after about a month of consistent self-talk practice, something amazing happened. She was at work, and a colleague asked her a question in English during a meeting. Without thinking, without translating, without the usual pause and struggle, she responded naturally and fluently. The English just flowed out of her mouth as if it had been waiting there, ready to be used. That moment was when she realized that all those hours of talking to herself while cooking, cleaning, and going about her daily life had been building something powerful inside her brain. The self-talk practice also helped Anna in ways she didn't expect. She became more aware of her daily life and more mindful of her experiences. When you're narrating your activities in any language, you become more present and observant. Anna found herself noticing details about her environment, her feelings, and her preferences that she had been overlooking before. This increased awareness made her self-talk richer and more interesting, which in turn made her English practice more engaging and effective. What Anna learned, and what I want you to understand, is that you don't need a conversation partner to practice speaking English. You don't need to wait for the perfect opportunity or the right person to talk to. You can start practicing right now, today, with yourself as your conversation partner. Your own life, your own activities, your own thoughts and feelings are the perfect material for English practice. You already know more English than you think. Instead of learning new complicated words, start using the simple words you already know in different ways. Take the word get, for example. You can say get up, get ready, get tired. You don't need fancy vocabulary to express yourself clearly. Simple words are powerful tools for communication. I want to share something with you that might completely change how you think about your English vocabulary. Right now, as you're listening to me, you're understanding hundreds of words that I'm using. You're following my thoughts, connecting with my ideas, and processing complex information. That means you already have a substantial English vocabulary living inside your mind. The challenge isn't that you don't know enough words. The challenge is learning to use the words you already know in more flexible and creative ways. Let me tell you about Roberto from Barcelona. Roberto was convinced that his English vocabulary was too limited to have real conversations. He would spend hours every day with vocabulary apps, trying to memorize long lists of advanced words. He knew words like sophisticated, magnificent, and extraordinary. But when someone asked him how his day was, he would freeze. He couldn't connect these fancy words to his real experiences and feelings. He was like someone who owned a toolbox full of specialized tools, but didn't know how to use a simple hammer and screwdriver. The breakthrough for Roberto came when he realized something powerful. The most fluent English speakers, including native speakers, use simple words most of the time. They don't walk around using complicated vocabulary in everyday conversations. They use words like get, make, have, go, come, and take constantly, but they use them in many different ways. When Roberto started paying attention to how native speakers actually talk, he was amazed at how much they could express with basic vocabulary. Think about the word get for a moment. This simple three-letter word is incredibly versatile in English. You can get up in the morning, get ready for work, get to the office, get started on a project, get tired during the day, get home in the evening, get dinner ready, get comfortable on the sofa, and get some sleep at night. One word, dozens of different meanings and uses. And you probably already know most of these uses, even if you haven't been consciously aware of how flexible this word is. Roberto started an experiment. Instead of learning new words, he decided to explore all the different ways he could use the words he already knew. He took the word make and discovered he could make breakfast, make a decision, make friends, make money, make mistakes, make progress, make sense, make time, and make someone happy. Each of these uses felt natural and conversational, much more so than trying to use complicated words that didn't fit the situation. This approach transformed Roberto's speaking confidence because he stopped feeling like he was missing essential vocabulary. Instead, he felt like he was discovering hidden potential in words he already possessed. It's like realizing that the clothes in your closet can be combined in many more ways than you thought, creating completely new outfits without buying anything new. Your existing English vocabulary has this same hidden potential. The word have is another perfect example of this principle. You can have breakfast, have a good time, have a problem, have a meeting, have a baby, have a headache, have fun, have trouble, have a point, and have no idea about something. Notice how this one simple word can express possession, experience, obligation, and so many other concepts. Native speakers use have in all these ways naturally, and you can too. What Roberto discovered, and what I want you to understand, is that fluency isn't about knowing the most words. It's about using the words you know with confidence and flexibility. When you master the art of using simple words in multiple ways, you can express almost any idea clearly and naturally. This is actually more impressive and more useful than knowing lots of complicated words that you're not sure how to use properly. Let's look at the word take for another moment. You can take a shower, take a break, take your time, take a picture, take medicine, take a test, take a walk, take care of someone, take it easy, and take a chance. Each of these expressions uses the same simple word, but creates a completely different meaning. The beauty is that these aren't random combinations you need to memorize. They follow patterns that feel natural once you start using them. Roberto told me that this realization was liberating. Instead of feeling frustrated about all the words he didn't know, he started feeling excited about all the possibilities within the words he did know. He began experimenting with combinations, playing with different uses, and discovering that he could express his thoughts much more easily than he had imagined. His conversations became more natural because he was using the same simple, flexible words that native speakers use every day. The word go offers another wonderful example of this flexibility. You can go home, go crazy, go wrong, go well, go out, go on, go through something difficult, go with something that matches, go without something you need, and go for your dreams. One word, but it can express movement, change, continuation, experience, and aspiration. These aren't complicated concepts that require advanced vocabulary. They're everyday ideas expressed with everyday words. What I love about this approach is that it builds confidence naturally. When you discover a new way to use a word you already know, it feels like unlocking a secret. You realize that English isn't as complicated as you thought. You don't need to learn thousands of new words to express yourself clearly. You need to explore the full potential of the words you already possess. Roberto's transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened steadily. Every day, he would choose one simple word and explore different ways to use it. He would listen for that word in movies, podcasts, and conversations, paying attention to all its different uses. Then he would practice incorporating those uses into his own speech. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by everything he didn't know, he felt empowered by everything he was discovering about what he already knew. This principle extends to so many words in English. The word come can mean to arrive, to happen, to originate from somewhere, to become available, or to reach a realization. The word put can mean to place something somewhere, to express an idea, to invest effort, to cause someone to experience something, or to postpone an activity. These simple words are like Swiss Army knives in English, capable of handling many different communication tasks. Luis from Lisbon found a great way to practice. He started recording voice messages to himself on his phone. He would talk about his day, his dreams, or anything that came to mind for just 2 minutes every day. You can do this too. Record yourself speaking English for 2 minutes. Don't worry about mistakes. Focus on expressing your thoughts naturally. Luis discovered this technique quite by accident. He was always frustrated because he wanted to practice speaking English, but he didn't have anyone to practice with regularly. His friends spoke Portuguese, his family spoke Portuguese, and at work, even though he sometimes used English in emails, most conversations happened in his native language. He felt stuck between wanting to improve his speaking but not having natural opportunities to do it. Then one evening, while he was walking home from work, he had an idea that changed everything. He pulled out his phone and opened the voice recording app that was already installed. Without overthinking it, he pressed record and started talking about his day in English. He talked about the weather, about what he had for lunch, about a funny conversation he had with a colleague, about his plans for the weekend. He spoke for exactly 2 minutes, then stopped the recording. When he played it back, he was surprised. Yes, there were mistakes. Yes, his accent was noticeable, but he had successfully expressed his thoughts in English for 2 whole minutes. That feeling of accomplishment was incredible. What Luis loved about this method was that it removed all the social pressure that usually made speaking English stressful for him. When you're recording yourself, there's no one waiting for you to respond quickly. There's no one judging your pronunciation or your word choices. There's no fear of misunderstanding or embarrassment. It's just you and your thoughts, finding their way into English words at your own pace. This relaxed environment is perfect for building confidence and fluency naturally. The beauty of Luis's approach is that 2 minutes is the perfect amount of time. It's long enough to get into a flow and express real thoughts, but short enough that it doesn't feel overwhelming or intimidating. When you know you only need to speak for 2 minutes, you're more likely to start, and you're more likely to be consistent. Luis told me that if he had tried to record himself for 10 or 15 minutes, he probably would have given up after a few days. But 2 minutes felt manageable, doable, even on busy days. What happened over the weeks as Luis continued this practice was fascinating. In the beginning, his 2-minute recordings were full of pauses, hesitations, and moments where he struggled to find words. He would say things like, "Today I went to the place where you buy food, the supermarket." But as days passed, these pauses became shorter. The words started flowing more easily. His confidence grew with each recording because he was proving to himself every single day that he could express himself in English. Luis discovered something really valuable about listening to his own recordings. At first, he was self-conscious about hearing his voice and his accent, but gradually he realized that listening to himself speak English was incredibly useful feedback. He could hear where he was getting stuck, which words he was pronouncing clearly, and which ones needed work. But more importantly, he could hear his progress. Each week, when he listened to his recordings from the previous week, he could notice improvement. His speech was becoming smoother, his vocabulary was expanding naturally, and his confidence was growing. The topics Luis chose for his recordings were beautifully varied and personal. Sometimes he would talk about his childhood memories, describing his favorite games or his grandmother's cooking. Other days, he would share his dreams and aspirations, talking about places he wanted to visit or skills he wanted to develop. He would discuss movies he had watched, books he was reading, or interesting conversations he had with friends. The key was that he always chose topics that genuinely interested him, topics that he actually wanted to talk about. This personal connection to the content made a huge difference in Luis's progress. When you're talking about something you care about, something that matters to you, the words come more naturally. Your emotions and genuine interest help drive the language forward. Luis wasn't just practicing English vocabulary and pronunciation, he was practicing expressing his authentic self in English, which is exactly what real fluency is about. One of the most powerful aspects of Luis's recording practice was that it helped him develop his own voice in English. Many English learners try to sound like someone else when they speak English, maybe like their teacher or like actors in movies. But through his daily recordings, Luis gradually found his natural way of expressing himself in English. He developed his own rhythm, his own style, his own personality in the language. This authenticity made his English much more engaging and natural when he eventually started having conversations with other people. Luis also used his recordings as a way to experiment with new words and expressions he had learned. Instead of just memorizing vocabulary from lists, he would try to use new words in his recordings in the context of his own thoughts and experiences. This made the new vocabulary stick much better in his memory because he was connecting it to his real life and genuine emotions. When you use a word to express your own thoughts, it becomes yours in a way that memorization alone can never achieve. After about 2 months of daily recordings, Luis decided to try something new. He started having pretend conversations with himself. He would play both roles, asking himself questions and then answering them. "Luis, how was your weekend?" he would ask. And then he would respond with details about what he had done. "What are you most excited about this month?" he would inquire, and then share his genuine enthusiasm about upcoming plans. This technique helped him practice the natural flow of conversation, the give and take of questions and responses. The technology aspect of this practice was perfect for Luis's lifestyle. His phone was always with him, so he could record anywhere and anytime. Sometimes he would record during his lunch break at work, finding a quiet corner and talking about his morning. Other times he would record while walking in the park on weekends, describing the scenery and his thoughts about nature. The flexibility of being able to practice anywhere made it easy to maintain consistency. Luis told me that one of the unexpected benefits of this practice was that it helped him become more comfortable with silence and pauses in English. In the beginning, every pause felt like a failure, like proof that his English wasn't good enough. But through his recordings, he learned that pauses are natural in any language. Even native speakers pause to think, to find the right word, or to organize their thoughts. This realization made him much more relaxed in actual conversations with other people. The recording practice also helped Luis develop better listening skills for his own English. When you listen to yourself regularly, you become more aware of the sounds of English, the rhythm and flow that makes the language musical and natural. This enhanced awareness improved not only his speaking, but also his ability to understand other people when they spoke English to him. Let me share something important with you. Mistakes are not your enemy. They are your teacher. Every time you make a mistake, you're learning something new. Native speakers make mistakes too. The goal is communication, not perfection. When you change your relationship with mistakes, everything becomes easier and more enjoyable. This is probably one of the most difficult concepts for English learners to accept, and I completely understand why. From the time we're children in school, we're taught that mistakes are bad, that they represent failure, that there's something to be avoided at all costs. We get red marks on our papers when we make mistakes. We lose points on tests when we get something wrong. Our brains have been trained to see mistakes as evidence that we're not smart enough, not prepared enough, not good enough. But when it comes to learning English, this mindset is not just unhelpful, it's actually preventing you from making progress. I want to tell you about Carmen from Valencia, who had the most incredible transformation when she changed her relationship with mistakes. Carmen was a perfectionist in every area of her life. She was successful at work, organized at home, and always strived to do everything correctly the first time. When she started learning English, she brought the same perfectionist approach to her language studies. She would spend hours preparing for every conversation, trying to anticipate every possible topic so she could have the perfect response ready. She would rehearse sentences in her head over and over again before speaking them out loud. But here's what happened to Carmen, and what happens to many perfectionists who try to learn English. The fear of making mistakes became so overwhelming that she stopped speaking altogether. She would be in situations where she could practice English, but instead of participating, she would stay quiet. She convinced herself that it was better to say nothing than to say something incorrectly. Can you imagine? Here was someone who was intelligent, capable, and motivated, but she was sabotaging her own progress because she was afraid of being imperfect. Carmen's breakthrough came when she witnessed something that completely changed her perspective. She was at an international conference where native English speakers from different countries were giving presentations. During one presentation, she heard a respected British professor say, "I want to explain you something," instead of, "I want to explain something to you." Later, she heard an American businessman say, "I have been here since 5 years," instead of, "I have been here for 5 years." These were educated, successful, native speakers, making what textbooks would call mistakes, but everyone understood them perfectly, and the conversations continued smoothly. That's when Carmen realized something profound. Communication is not about speaking perfectly. Communication is about sharing ideas, connecting with people, and expressing yourself clearly enough to be understood. Those native speakers had communicated effectively despite their small errors, because their listeners focused on the message, not on the technical correctness of every word. This observation liberated Carmen from the prison of perfectionism she had created for herself. Carmen decided to conduct an experiment. For 1 month, she would focus entirely on communication and completely ignore whether she was making mistakes. She would speak English whenever she had the opportunity, and instead of worrying about correctness, she would focus on expressing her ideas clearly. The results were remarkable. Within just 2 weeks, she was having conversations she had never imagined possible. Yes, she made mistakes, but people understood her. Conversations flowed naturally, and she was actually enjoying speaking English for the first time. What Carmen discovered, and what I want you to understand deeply, is that mistakes are actually evidence that you're trying. When you make a mistake in English, it means you're pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. It means you're attempting to express ideas that are challenging for you. It means you're growing. The people who never make mistakes in English are usually the people who only say things they're absolutely certain about, which means they're not challenging themselves or expanding their abilities. Think about how children learn their native language. They make mistakes constantly. They say things like, "I go to the store," or "she hit the ball." Do their parents panic and think the children will never learn to speak correctly? Of course not. Everyone understands that mistakes are a natural, necessary part of the learning process. Children learn by experimenting, by trying things, by getting feedback from the world around them. The same process works for adults learning English, but we've forgotten how to be patient and kind with ourselves during the learning process. Carmen also discovered that when she stopped being afraid of mistakes, she became a much better listener. When you're terrified of making errors yourself, you tend to listen to other people's English with a critical ear, focusing on their mistakes rather than their message. But when Carmen accepted that mistakes are normal and natural, she started listening for understanding and connection rather than correctness. This made her a better conversationalist and helped her learn more from every interaction. One of the most liberating realizations Carmen had was that native speakers are incredibly forgiving of mistakes made by English learners. Think about it from their perspective. When someone is speaking to you in your native language, but it's their second or third language, are you impressed by their effort, or are you judging their errors? Most people are impressed. They're thinking, "Wow, this person speaks my language better than I speak theirs." They're usually patient, helpful, and appreciative of your efforts to communicate in their language. Carmen started seeing mistakes as valuable feedback rather than failures. When someone didn't understand something she said, instead of feeling embarrassed, she would think, "Interesting, that didn't work. Let me try a different way to express this idea." This curiosity about communication replaced her fear of imperfection. She became like a scientist experimenting with language, discovering what worked and what needed adjustment. The transformation in Carmen's English fluency was remarkable, but the transformation in her enjoyment of English was even more significant. When she stopped being afraid of mistakes, English became fun again. She could be spontaneous in conversations. She could take risks with new words and expressions. She could be herself, with all her imperfections, while speaking English. This authenticity made her English much more engaging and natural. Carmen shared with me that changing her relationship with mistakes didn't just improve her English. It improved her entire approach to learning and trying new things. She became more willing to take risks in other areas of her life because she had learned that mistakes are not catastrophes. They're simply information that helps you improve and grow. This confidence and resilience that she developed through accepting mistakes in English became a gift that enhanced many other aspects of her life. Sophia from Rome used this simple technique that you can try right now. She would listen to short English conversations and repeat them out loud, not word by word, but trying to copy the rhythm and flow. You can do this with movies, podcasts, or even this episode. Listen, then repeat. Your mouth will get used to English sounds. Sophia's discovery of this technique came from a place of frustration that many of you will recognize immediately. She had been studying English for years through traditional methods. She could read English newspapers, she understood most of what she heard in movies when she used subtitles, and she could write emails that were clear and correct. But when she tried to speak, something strange would happen. The words would come out flat, mechanical, almost robotic. She sounded like she was reading from a textbook rather than having a natural conversation. Sophia realized that her problem wasn't vocabulary or understanding. Her problem was that her mouth wasn't used to making English sounds in a natural way. She had trained her eyes to recognize English and her ears to understand English, but she had never properly trained her mouth to produce English with the rhythm, flow, and musicality that makes the language sound natural and fluent. That's when she started experimenting with what she called her echo practice. The way Sophia approached this was beautifully simple. She would find short clips of English conversations, maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute long, from sources she enjoyed. Sometimes it was a scene from a movie she loved. Sometimes it was a segment from a podcast interview. And sometimes it was even a conversation from a TV show. The key was that she chose content with natural, conversational English, rather than formal or academic speech. She wanted to learn how real people talk in real situations. Here's how Sophia's process worked. She would listen to the short clip once just to understand what was being said. She wouldn't worry about repeating anything yet. She would just focus on comprehension and getting a feel for the conversation. Then she would listen again. But this time she would pay attention to the music of the language. How did the voices rise and fall? Where were the pauses? Which words were emphasized? Where did the speakers speed up or slow down? She was listening for the rhythm and melody of English. After listening several times for rhythm and flow, Sophia would start her repetition practice. But here's what made her approach so effective. She wasn't trying to repeat every single word perfectly. Instead, she was trying to capture the overall sound and feeling of the conversation. If someone in the clip said, "I can't believe how beautiful the weather is today," Sophia might repeat something like, "I can't believe how beautiful the weather is today." But her focus wasn't on getting every word exactly right. Her focus was on matching the intonation, the stress patterns, and the natural flow of the original speaker. This approach worked so well for Sophia because it trained her mouth and her ear simultaneously. When you try to match the rhythm and flow of native English speakers, your mouth learns to make the movements that create natural English sounds. Your tongue learns where to go, your lips learn how to shape different sounds, and your vocal cords learn how to create the right intonation patterns. It's like musical training for your speaking muscles. Sophia told me that within just a few weeks of practicing this technique daily, she noticed a dramatic change in how her English sounded. People started commenting that her English was more natural, more fluent, more pleasant to listen to. But the most important change was how speaking English felt to her. Instead of feeling like she was forcing foreign sounds out of her mouth, speaking English started to feel smooth and natural. The rhythm and melody of the language began to feel familiar and comfortable. One of the things Sophia loved about this practice was that it was actually enjoyable. Instead of drilling boring exercises or memorizing word lists, she was engaging with content she found interesting while improving her English at the same time. She would choose movie scenes with dialogue she found funny, or podcast interviews with people she admired. This made the practice feel less like work and more like entertainment with a learning benefit. Sophia also discovered that this technique helped her with listening comprehension in ways she hadn't expected. When you practice matching the rhythm and flow of English, you become much more sensitive to the patterns of the language. You start to recognize how native speakers group words together, how they use stress and intonation to convey meaning, and how they create emphasis and emotion through their voice. This enhanced sensitivity made it much easier for Sophia to understand native speakers in real conversations. The beauty of Sophia's approach is that it works with whatever English content you already enjoy. If you love watching cooking shows, you can use short clips from cooking shows. If you enjoy listening to interviews with musicians, you can use segments from those interviews. If you like following news programs, you can use brief news segments. The content doesn't matter as much as the consistency of practice and your focus on rhythm and flow, rather than word-perfect repetition. Sophia found that different types of content offered different benefits. Movie dialogues helped her with conversational English and emotional expression. News broadcasts helped her with clear, formal pronunciation. Podcast interviews helped her with natural, spontaneous speech patterns. Talk show segments helped her with humor and casual interaction. By varying her sources, she exposed her mouth and her ear to many different styles of natural English. After about 2 months of consistent practice, Sophia decided to record herself doing one of her repeat after me sessions. When she listened to the recording, she was amazed at the transformation. Her English had developed a natural rhythm and musicality that had been completely missing before. She sounded like someone who was comfortable with the language, someone who understood not just the words but the music of English. Sophia's technique also helped her develop confidence in group conversations. Before she started this practice, she would often understand what people were saying, but feel hesitant to jump into conversations because she was worried about how she sounded. But after training her mouth to produce natural English rhythms, she felt much more confident contributing to discussions. Her English felt like a natural extension of her thoughts, rather than a foreign system she had to navigate carefully. The listen and repeat method that Sophia developed is something you can start using immediately. You don't need special materials or expensive programs. You just need access to English audio content and the willingness to use your voice. Start with short segments. Focus on rhythm and flow over perfect word reproduction. And be patient with yourself as your mouth learns these new movement patterns. Your English will develop a natural musicality that will make you sound more fluent and feel more confident in every conversation. You don't need to find a native speaker to practice with. You can practice with other English learners just like yourself. When two people are learning together, there's less pressure and more support. Look for language exchange groups online or in your city. Remember, you're all in this together. Let me tell you about Francesca from Milan, who discovered something wonderful about finding practice partners that completely changed her English journey. For months, Francesca had been convinced that she needed to find native English speakers to practice with if she wanted to improve. She spent so much time searching for native speakers online, joining expensive conversation clubs, and feeling disappointed when she couldn't find regular opportunities to speak with people whose first language was English. She had created this belief in her mind that practicing with other learners would somehow be less valuable or even harmful to her progress. But then something unexpected happened that opened Francesca's eyes to a completely different approach. She was at a local community center in Milan where they offered various classes and activities. She noticed a small sign on the bulletin board that said, "English Practice Group, all levels welcome." Out of curiosity, she decided to attend one of their meetings. When she walked into the room, she found 8 people from different countries, all living in Milan, all learning English, all with different levels of ability, but all sharing the same goal of improving their speaking skills. What Francesca discovered in that room was something magical that she had never experienced before. The atmosphere was completely different from her attempts to practice with native speakers. There was no judgment, no impatience, no feeling that she was bothering someone or taking up their time. Everyone in the room understood exactly what she was going through, because they were going through the same challenges themselves. When someone struggled to find a word, others would wait patiently or even help by suggesting possibilities. When someone made a mistake, no one looked annoyed or confused. Everyone just continued the conversation naturally. The first conversation Francesca had that evening was with Ahmed from Morocco, who had been living in Italy for 2 years. His English level was similar to hers, maybe slightly better in some areas and slightly weaker in others. They talked about their experiences learning Italian, their favorite places in Milan, and their reasons for wanting to improve their English. The conversation flowed so naturally that Francesca forgot to be nervous about her pronunciation or her accent. She was too engaged in the actual communication to worry about the technical aspects of her English. What struck Francesca most powerfully was how supportive everyone was of each other. When she couldn't remember the word homesick, another participant gently suggested it, and instead of feeling embarrassed, Francesca felt grateful. When Ahmed was struggling to explain a concept about his work, the group listened patiently and asked helpful questions to understand what he meant. This collaborative spirit made everyone feel safe to take risks, to try new words, and to express complex ideas even when they weren't sure they were doing it perfectly. Francesca realized that practicing with other learners offered unique advantages that she had never considered. First, everyone spoke at a pace that was comfortable for learners. Native speakers often talk quickly, use idioms and slang that can be confusing, and sometimes forget that their conversation partner is still developing their English skills. But when learners talk together, there's a natural understanding of each other's pace and level. Conversations happen at a speed that allows everyone to participate fully. Another advantage Francesca discovered was that other learners often explain things in ways that are easier to understand than native speakers do. When native speakers try to help with vocabulary or expressions, they sometimes use explanations that are more complex than the original problem. But when another learner explains something, they often use simpler language and relate it to their own learning experience. They remember what it was like not to know that word or concept, so their explanations are more accessible and practical. The diversity of backgrounds in Francesca's practice group also enriched her learning experience tremendously. She practiced with people from Morocco, Brazil, Poland, India, and South Korea. Each person brought their own perspective, their own stories, and their own way of using English. This exposure to different accents, different cultural perspectives, and different ways of expressing ideas actually prepared Francesca much better for real-world English conversations than practicing with just one native speaker ever could have. Over the weeks that followed, Francesca's confidence grew exponentially. She looked forward to the weekly meetings and even started organizing additional practice sessions with some of the group members. They would meet for coffee and spend an hour just talking in English about their lives, their work, their dreams, and their challenges. These informal conversations were just as valuable as the organized group sessions because they gave everyone a chance to practice English in relaxed social situations. One of the most beautiful aspects of Francesca's experience was the friendships that developed within the group. These weren't just practice partners, they became genuine friends who supported each other's learning journey. They would send each other articles in English, recommend movies and podcasts, and celebrate each other's progress. When someone in the group got promoted at work after a successful English interview, everyone felt proud and happy. When someone struggled with a particular challenge, the group would brainstorm solutions together. Francesca also discovered that teaching and helping others actually improved her own English significantly. When newer members joined the group, she would find herself explaining concepts, sharing tips that had worked for her, and offering encouragement to people who were at earlier stages of their journey. This process of explaining and teaching forced her to articulate her knowledge more clearly and reinforced her own understanding of English concepts. The online component of finding practice partners opened up even more opportunities for Francesca. She discovered language exchange websites and apps where she could connect with English learners from around the world. She had regular video calls with a woman from Tokyo who was learning English, while Francesca was learning Japanese. They would spend half their conversation time speaking English and half speaking Japanese, creating a mutually beneficial exchange that helped both of them improve. What Francesca learned, and what I want you to understand, is that the journey of learning English becomes so much richer and more enjoyable when you share it with others who are on the same path. You don't need to wait until you find the perfect native speaker to practice with. You can start improving your English conversation skills right now by connecting with other learners who understand your challenges, share your goals, and can offer the kind of patient, supportive practice environment that allows you to grow with confidence. The community aspect of learning English with others creates accountability, motivation, and joy that individual study simply cannot provide. When you know that your practice partners are counting on you to show up, when you see their progress inspiring your own efforts, and when you experience the satisfaction of helping someone else while improving yourself, English learning transforms from a solitary struggle into a shared adventure that enriches not only your language skills but also your life. Here's a simple challenge that works. Every day, try to say one new sentence in English. It can be about anything. How you feel, what you see, what you want to do. Just one sentence. By the end of the week, you'll have 7 new sentences. By the end of the month, you'll be amazed at your progress. I want to share with you the story of Marcus from Frankfurt, who transformed his English-speaking abilities through this incredibly simple but powerful approach. Marcus was someone who had been studying English for years through books, apps, and online courses, but he felt stuck in a cycle where his English wasn't improving in any meaningful way. He knew thousands of words. He understood complex English texts. He could follow movies and podcasts without much difficulty. But when it came to actually speaking, he felt like he was starting from zero every single time. Marcus had fallen into what I call the preparation trap. He kept telling himself that he needed to study more, learn more vocabulary, understand more advanced concepts before he could start speaking regularly. He was waiting for the perfect moment when he would feel completely ready and confident. Of course, that moment never came because confidence in speaking comes from speaking, not from studying about speaking. He was like someone who wanted to learn to swim but spent all their time reading about swimming techniques instead of getting in the water. The daily challenge approach appealed to Marcus because it was so manageable that he couldn't make excuses for not doing it. 1 sentence per day. That was it. No pressure to have long conversations, no need to find speaking partners, no requirement to set aside large blocks of time for practice. Just 1 sentence, every single day, about anything at all. The simplicity of this commitment made it impossible for Marcus to convince himself that he didn't have time or that he wasn't ready. On his first day, Marcus chose to express something very simple about his immediate environment. He looked out his window and said, "The sky looks gray and cloudy this morning." It took him about 10 seconds to think of the sentence, and another 5 seconds to say it out loud. That was it. 15 seconds of English practice, but those 15 seconds represented something much more significant than their duration might suggest. They represented the beginning of a new habit, a new relationship with speaking English. What Marcus discovered over the first week was fascinating. Each day, creating his 1 sentence became a little easier and a little more natural. Day 2. I'm drinking coffee and it tastes stronger than usual. Day 3. My colleague told a funny joke during lunch today. Day 4. I feel tired because I stayed up late watching a movie. By the end of the first week, Marcus realized that he was no longer struggling to find words or construct basic sentences. The daily practice was creating a smoothness in his English expression that years of studying had never achieved. The beauty of Marcus's approach was that he gave himself complete freedom in choosing what to talk about each day. Sometimes his sentences were about his emotions. I feel excited about the weekend plans I made. Sometimes they were observations about his surroundings. The coffee shop on my street corner has the most amazing smell every morning. Sometimes they were about his goals and dreams. I want to visit New Zealand someday and see the landscapes from the movies. This variety kept the practice interesting and prevented it from becoming boring or mechanical. Marcus was expressing genuine thoughts and feelings, which made the English feel authentic and personally meaningful. When you practice English by expressing your real thoughts about your real life, the language becomes connected to your identity, rather than remaining an external skill you're trying to acquire. After the first month, Marcus decided to expand his challenge slightly. Instead of just saying 1 sentence, he started explaining his sentence with 1 additional thought. So if his sentence was, "I enjoyed the book I finished reading yesterday," he might add, "The main character reminded me of my brother because he was always optimistic even in difficult situations." This natural expansion happened organically because Marcus felt comfortable and confident with the basic sentence structure. What impressed Marcus most about this approach was how it eliminated the overwhelm that had been paralyzing his speaking practice before. When you know you only need to create 1 sentence, you don't feel pressured to be brilliant or comprehensive. You don't worry about having a complete conversation or impressing anyone with your eloquence. You just need to express 1 complete thought clearly in English, and that feels completely achievable even on busy or difficult days. Marcus also discovered that his daily sentence practice was improving his English in ways that went beyond just speaking. Because he was constantly thinking about how to express his daily experiences in English, he became more observant of his life and more reflective about his thoughts and feelings. He started noticing details about his environment, his emotions, and his experiences that he had been overlooking before. This increased awareness made his life richer while simultaneously giving him more material for English practice. The cumulative effect of Marcus's daily challenge was remarkable. After 3 months, he had expressed over 90 different thoughts in English, covering topics ranging from his work experiences to his childhood memories, from his opinions about current events to his hopes for the future. He had practiced expressing emotions like frustration, joy, curiosity, and contentment. He had described places, people, foods, activities, and ideas. Without realizing it, he had built a comprehensive foundation of English expression rooted in his authentic experiences. One of the most powerful aspects of Marcus's practice was that it created a sense of daily accomplishment and progress. Every single day, no matter what else happened, he could go to bed knowing that he had successfully expressed himself in English. This daily victory built confidence steadily and consistently. Instead of feeling like English was something he was bad at or struggling with, he started to see himself as someone who spoke English every day, someone for whom English expression was a normal, natural part of daily life. Marcus told me that after 6 months of this daily practice, something wonderful happened. He was at an international conference for work, and during a break, he found himself naturally joining a conversation with colleagues from different countries. The English flowed out of him smoothly and confidently. He wasn't translating from German or struggling to construct sentences. He was simply expressing his thoughts in English the same way he had been doing every day for months in his one-sentence practice. The daily challenge also helped Marcus develop consistency in his learning, which is far more powerful than intensity. Instead of having occasional long study sessions followed by days or weeks without practice, he was engaging with English every single day. This consistent daily contact with the language kept English active and accessible in his mind. His brain didn't have time to forget or get rusty because it was being reminded daily that English was an active, useful part of his life. What Marcus learned, and what I want you to understand, is that transformation happens through small, consistent actions rather than dramatic efforts. One sentence per day might seem too simple to matter, but over time, it builds something profound. The habit of thinking and expressing yourself in English as a natural part of your daily experience. When you want to say something in English, don't translate from your native language. Instead, think about the picture or situation in your mind, then describe what you see in English. This helps you think directly in English. It takes practice, but it's one of the most effective ways to become more fluent. I want to share with you the incredible transformation of Elena from Athens, who discovered this technique almost by accident, and how it revolutionized her entire approach to speaking English. Elena had been struggling with what so many English learners face, the mental translation process that made her English feel slow, unnatural, and exhausting. Every time she wanted to say something in English, her brain would first formulate the thought in Greek, then work hard to translate each word and concept into English, and finally try to reorganize everything to make sense in English word order. This translation process was creating several problems for Elena. First, it made her English conversations feel like mental marathons. By the time she had translated her thoughts and spoken them, the conversation had often moved on to a different topic. Second, her English sounded stiff and artificial because she was essentially speaking Greek thoughts dressed up in English words. Third, she was constantly frustrated because she knew that native English speakers didn't go through this exhausting mental process every time they wanted to express an idea. Elena's breakthrough came during a very ordinary moment. She was sitting in a cafe in Athens, video calling her friend Sarah, who lived in London. During their conversation, Elena wanted to tell Sarah about the beautiful sunset she could see from the cafe window. Instead of thinking in Greek first, she found herself looking at the actual sunset and trying to describe what her eyes were seeing directly in English. "The sky is orange and pink," she said, "and the sun looks like a big, golden ball behind the buildings." What surprised Elena was how natural and effortless that description felt. She wasn't translating the Greek words for orange, pink, sun, or buildings. She was looking at the actual colors and shapes and finding English words to match what she was observing. The English came directly from her visual experience rather than through the filter of her native language. That moment of direct connection between sight and English expression felt completely different from her usual speaking experience. Inspired by this discovery, Elena decided to practice this visual approach deliberately. She started by describing simple objects around her apartment without allowing herself to think in Greek first. She would look at her coffee cup and say, "This is a white ceramic mug with a blue handle." She would observe her cat and describe, "My cat is stretching on the windowsill in the warm sunlight." She was training her brain to connect English words directly to visual reality rather than routing through Greek translation. The technique worked beautifully for concrete, physical descriptions, but Elena wondered if it could work for more abstract concepts as well. She experimented with describing her emotions and experiences through visual metaphors. Instead of translating the Greek concept of feeling overwhelmed, she would think about what that feeling looked like in her mind and describe it. I feel like I'm standing at the bottom of a very tall mountain of tasks. Instead of translating her excitement about a job opportunity, she described the visual sensation. When I think about this new job, I see bright lights and open doors. This visual approach began transforming Elena's relationship with English in profound ways. She noticed that her English was becoming more colorful, more descriptive, and more interesting to listen to. When she described experiences by painting pictures with words rather than translating abstract concepts, her stories became more engaging and easier for others to understand. Her friends started commenting that her English was becoming more natural and expressive. Elena discovered that thinking in pictures also helped her learn new vocabulary more effectively. Instead of memorizing English words with Greek translations, she started connecting English words directly to visual images or experiences. When she learned the word cozy, she connected it to the image of her living room on a winter evening with soft lighting and warm blankets. When she encountered the word bustling, she linked it to the visual memory of the busy morning scene at her neighborhood market. The visual thinking approach also improved Elena's listening comprehension significantly. When other people spoke English, instead of trying to translate their words into Greek to understand them, she started visualizing what they were describing. If someone said, "I went to a charming little restaurant with outdoor seating overlooking the harbor," Elena would create a mental picture of that scene rather than translating each word. This visual processing made understanding faster and more natural. One of the most liberating aspects of this technique for Elena was that it freed her from the limitations of direct translation. Many concepts, emotions, and experiences don't translate perfectly between languages. When Elena was trying to translate from Greek to English, she often felt frustrated because some ideas couldn't be expressed exactly the same way. But when she thought in pictures and described what she visualized, she could express these concepts naturally in English using whatever words and phrases felt right for the image in her mind. Elena found that this approach worked particularly well for storytelling and sharing experiences. Instead of translating the sequence of events from a Greek narrative structure, she would visualize the experience like a movie in her mind and describe what she saw happening. I can see myself walking into the crowded train station, looking up at the big departure board, feeling confused by all the information, then asking a friendly employee for help. The story flowed naturally because she was describing a visual sequence rather than translating a linguistic structure. The practice also helped Elena develop a more intuitive sense of English word choice and expression. When you're describing what you visualize, you naturally choose words that fit the image rather than words that match a translation. Elena found herself using more natural combinations of words, more appropriate prepositions, and more authentic expressions because she was responding to visual reality rather than following translation patterns from Greek. After several months of practicing this visual thinking approach, Elena noticed something remarkable happening in her spontaneous conversations. Her English had developed a flow and naturalness that amazed even her. She was no longer conscious of the thinking process behind her words. The connection between her thoughts, her mental images, and her English expression had become so smooth that speaking English felt almost as effortless as speaking Greek. Elena shared with me that learning to think in pictures rather than translate words was like discovering a completely different pathway to English fluency. It bypassed all the mental bottlenecks that had been slowing her down and connected her directly to the natural, visual way that all humans actually think, before we put our thoughts into any language. Start using English in real situations, even small ones. Order coffee in English if you can, ask for directions, or comment on social media posts in English. These real-world practices build your confidence faster than any textbook. Every interaction is a victory, no matter how small. Let me tell you about Diego from Barcelona, who discovered the transformative power of bringing English into his real daily life, instead of keeping it confined to study sessions and practice exercises. Diego had spent 2 years attending English classes twice a week, completing workbook exercises, and watching English movies with subtitles. But he still felt like English was something separate from his actual life. It existed in a bubble of educational activities that had no connection to his real experiences, real needs, or real relationships. Diego's awakening came when he realized that he was treating English like a hobby rather than a practical tool for communication. He had created this artificial separation where English belonged in classrooms and textbooks, while his real life happened entirely in Spanish. This separation was keeping his English theoretical and academic rather than practical and functional. He decided to start breaking down this barrier by finding small, manageable ways to use English in his actual daily routine. The first real situation Diego chose was incredibly simple, but surprisingly powerful. Barcelona has many international tourists, and Diego worked near the city center where he often encountered people who looked lost or confused. Instead of walking past these situations as he always had before, Diego started offering help in English. "Excuse me, do you need directions?" became his first real English sentence used with actual strangers for genuine communication purposes. What amazed Diego about these interactions was how different they felt from practice conversations in class. When someone was genuinely lost and needed help, and Diego could provide that help in English, both people benefited from the communication. The English wasn't just an exercise or a performance. It was serving a real purpose, solving a real problem, creating a real connection between two people. This authentic usefulness made the English feel important and meaningful in a way that practice dialogues never had. Encouraged by the success of his direction-giving interactions, Diego started looking for other small opportunities to use English in real situations. He began commenting on English language posts on social media, not just reading them passively as he had before. Instead of just liking photos or articles, he would write brief comments like, "Beautiful sunset," or "Thanks for sharing this interesting article," or "I had a similar experience last year." These comments were simple, but they were real communication with real people about real content. The beauty of Diego's social media engagement was that it created a record of his English progress. He could look back at his comments from weeks earlier and see how his expression was becoming more natural and confident over time. More importantly, people responded to his comments, creating mini conversations that gave him practice with back-and-forth English communication. These weren't formal language exchanges or structured practice sessions. They were spontaneous, authentic interactions that happened naturally through shared interests. Diego also started using English in service situations when the opportunity arose. Barcelona has many international restaurants, shops, and services where English is commonly used. Instead of automatically switching to Spanish or Catalan, Diego would try English first in these situations. "Could I have a table for two, please?" At restaurants. "Do you have this in a different size?" At clothing stores. "What time do you close today?" At various shops. These interactions were brief, but real, and they required Diego to think on his feet and respond to unpredictable situations. What Diego discovered through these real-world English interactions was that communication success felt completely different from academic success. When he got a good grade on a test or completed an exercise correctly, he felt satisfied with his performance. But when he successfully helped a tourist find their hotel, or when someone responded positively to his social media comment, or when he successfully ordered exactly what he wanted at a restaurant, he felt genuinely useful and capable. This feeling of real-world competence was incredibly motivating and addictive. The unpredictability of real situations also challenged Diego in ways that textbook exercises never could. In class, he knew what topic would be covered and could prepare mentally for specific types of conversations. But when a tourist asked him about the best way to get to Park Güell, or when a shopkeeper offered him a discount he didn't understand, Diego had to think quickly and adapt his English to unexpected situations. This flexibility and responsiveness are essential skills for real fluency that can only be developed through authentic interactions. Diego found that real-world English practice also improved his listening skills dramatically. In classroom settings, teachers speak clearly and at appropriate speeds for learners. But in real situations, people speak naturally, with background noise, interruptions, and all the messiness of authentic communication. Diego had to learn to understand English in noisy cafes, on busy streets, and in echoing train stations. This real-world listening practice prepared him for English communication in ways that pristine classroom audio never could. One of the most powerful aspects of Diego's approach was how it connected English to positive emotions and experiences. When he helped someone in English, he felt helpful and proud. When he successfully navigated a service interaction in English, he felt confident and capable. When his social media comments led to interesting conversations, he felt socially connected and intellectually engaged. These positive emotional associations made English feel rewarding and enjoyable, rather than stressful and academic. Diego also discovered that real-world English practice taught him vocabulary and expressions that textbooks rarely cover. Through actual interactions, he learned how people really ask for help, how they express gratitude, how they make small talk, and how they handle misunderstandings. He learned the difference between polite and casual ways of speaking, and he developed an intuitive sense of what sounded natural in different situations. After 6 months of actively seeking real-world English opportunities, Diego felt like a completely different English speaker. His confidence had grown exponentially because he had proof that his English actually worked in real situations with real people for real purposes. He wasn't just someone who studied English. He was someone who used English as a practical tool in his daily life. This identity shift was powerful and lasting. Diego shared with me that the key to his success was starting small and celebrating every interaction, no matter how brief or simple. He didn't wait until he felt perfectly prepared. He started using English in real situations while he was still learning, and those real situations became some of his most effective teachers. Each authentic interaction taught him something that no textbook could, and each success built confidence that motivated him to try more challenging communications. Make English part of your daily routine. Change your phone settings to English. Watch English videos while exercising, or listen to English music while commuting. When English becomes part of your everyday life, speaking it becomes more natural. You're training your brain to switch to English mode automatically. Let me share with you the remarkable story of Katarina from Prague, who transformed her English fluency not through intensive study sessions, but by weaving English into the fabric of her daily life so seamlessly that it became as natural as breathing. Katarina was a busy marketing professional who had been frustrated with her English progress for years. She would sign up for intensive courses, buy expensive learning programs, and set ambitious goals to study for hours each week. But her busy schedule always seemed to interfere with these grand plans. The turning point for Katarina came when she realized that she was approaching English learning backwards. Instead of trying to find extra time for English study, she decided to integrate English into the time she was already spending on daily activities. This shift in thinking changed everything for her. Rather than adding English practice to her already full schedule, she began replacing her native language with English in situations where she was already engaged in routine activities. Katarina started with the simplest possible change. She switched her smartphone settings to English. This might sound like a tiny adjustment, but the impact was immediate and profound. Suddenly, every time she checked her messages, used apps, or navigated her phone's features, she was reading and processing English. Her brain was getting constant, low-level exposure to English throughout the day without any additional time commitment or effort on her part. What fascinated Katarina about this phone language change was how quickly her brain adapted. Within just a few days, she stopped consciously noticing that her phone was in English. The English interface became automatic and natural. But more importantly, her brain was building comfort and familiarity with English words and phrases that appeared constantly in her daily digital life. Words like settings, notifications, messages, and applications became as familiar as their Czech equivalents. Encouraged by this success, Katarina began expanding her English integration strategy to other areas of her routine. She changed her computer settings to English, which meant that her work environment was now partially conducted in English every day. Email applications, document programs, and web browsers were all displaying English menus and options. This workplace integration was particularly valuable because it connected English to her professional activities and made the language feel relevant to her career goals. Katarina's commute to work became another opportunity for effortless English integration. Instead of listening to Czech radio or music during her daily 40-minute train ride, she started listening to English podcasts and music. This wasn't dedicated study time. It was simply choosing English content for entertainment and information during time she was already spending on her commute. The consistency of this daily exposure created a powerful cumulative effect on her listening comprehension and vocabulary. The beauty of Katarina's approach was that it required no willpower or motivation to maintain. She wasn't forcing herself to sit down and study English when she felt tired or busy. Instead, she was naturally encountering English during activities she was going to do anyway. When motivation was low or life became stressful, her English exposure continued automatically because it was built into her existing routines rather than added as an extra burden. Katerina also transformed her exercise routine into English practice time. She had always watched Czech television or listened to Czech podcasts while using the treadmill at her gym. She switched to English fitness videos, English documentaries, and English motivational content. This change turned her workout time into dual-purpose time that benefited both her physical health and her English development. The physical activity actually seemed to help her English processing, because she was relaxed and not overthinking the language input. The cumulative effect of these small changes was remarkable. Within a few months, Katerina was receiving several hours of English exposure every single day, without dedicating any specific time to English study. Her commute provided listening practice, her phone and computer usage provided reading practice, her exercise time provided visual and auditory input, and her social media consumption was increasingly happening in English as she began following English language accounts and pages. What surprised Katerina most was how this passive exposure began affecting her active English production. Without consciously trying to improve her speaking, she noticed that English words and phrases were coming to mind more quickly and naturally. The constant input was creating a rich reservoir of language that her brain could draw from when she needed to express herself. She had created an English-rich environment that was training her brain to think in English patterns, without the stress and effort of formal study. Katerina expanded her habit creation to include her entertainment choices. Instead of watching Czech movies and shows exclusively, she began choosing English content for at least half of her viewing time. She discovered English YouTubers who covered topics she was genuinely interested in, rather than watching English content just for language learning purposes. This authentic interest made the English input more engaging and memorable. The social aspect of Katerina's English habits also evolved naturally. She began participating in English language online communities related to her hobbies and professional interests. Instead of seeking out language learning forums, she joined English-speaking groups focused on marketing, fitness, cooking, and travel. This gave her English interaction opportunities that were driven by genuine interests rather than language practice obligations. One of the most powerful aspects of Katerina's approach was how it changed her identity relationship with English. Instead of seeing herself as someone who was studying English, she began to see herself as someone who lived partially in English. English wasn't something external that she was trying to learn. It was becoming an integrated part of who she was and how she moved through her daily life. Katerina told me that after a year of this integrated approach, she realized she was thinking in English during many routine activities. When she was navigating her phone, planning her workday, or processing information during her commute, English thoughts were arising naturally. Her brain had learned to associate certain contexts and activities with English, creating automatic triggers that switched her into English thinking mode. The habit creation approach also made Katerina's English learning sustainable in ways that intensive study methods had never been. When life became busy or stressful, her English didn't disappear because it wasn't dependent on finding extra time or maintaining high motivation. The English was woven into activities she was going to do regardless of her energy level or available time. What Katerina discovered, and what I want you to understand, is that creating English habits is about making the language invisible and automatic, rather than effortful and conscious. When English becomes the natural backdrop of your daily activities, your brain begins to process it as a normal part of life, rather than as a foreign system to be studied. Remember to celebrate every small improvement. Did you successfully order something in English? Celebrate it. Did you understand a movie scene without subtitles? That's amazing progress. You're doing better than you think. And I'm proud of every step you're taking on this journey. I want to tell you about Olivier from Lyon, who discovered something that completely transformed his English learning experience and his relationship with his own progress. Olivier was trapped in what I call the perfection prison, where he was so focused on all the English he didn't know yet that he completely overlooked all the English he was successfully using every day. He had developed this habit of measuring his English ability only against native speaker fluency, which meant that no matter how much he improved, he always felt like he was failing. Olivier's transformation began with a simple realization during what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday evening. He was watching an English movie, and about 30 minutes into the film, he suddenly realized that he had been following the entire plot, understanding the characters' emotions, and even laughing at the jokes without looking at the subtitles even once. Instead of celebrating this incredible achievement, his first thought was, "But I still don't understand every single word." That moment of self-criticism made him pause and reflect on how unfairly he was treating his own progress. For the first time, Olivier decided to consciously acknowledge what had just happened. He had understood 30 minutes of natural, fast-paced English dialogue. He had connected emotionally with characters speaking in English. He had processed humor, sarcasm, and complex emotional situations in a language that wasn't his native tongue. When he really thought about it objectively, this was an extraordinary accomplishment that deserved recognition and celebration, not criticism for not being perfect. That evening, Olivier started what he called his victory journal. He decided to write down one English success from each day, no matter how small it might seem. The next day, his entry was simply, "I understood the weather forecast on the English news station." The day after that, "I helped a tourist find the train station, and she understood my directions perfectly." These weren't dramatic breakthroughs, but they were real evidence of his English working effectively in real situations. What Olivier discovered through his victory journal was astounding. When he started paying attention to his English successes instead of obsessing over his limitations, he realized that he was using English successfully dozens of times every day. He was reading English websites, understanding English instructions, processing English emails, and thinking in English more often than he had ever noticed. His English wasn't perfect, but it was functional, useful, and constantly improving. The act of celebrating these small victories created a psychological shift that was incredibly powerful. Instead of feeling frustrated and discouraged about his English abilities, Olivier began to feel proud and motivated. Each small success he acknowledged became fuel for continuing his efforts. Each celebration reinforced the identity of someone who was successfully learning and using English, rather than someone who was failing to master it perfectly. Olivier started celebrating his English victories in small but meaningful ways. When he successfully understood a challenging podcast episode, he would treat himself to his favorite coffee. When he had a smooth English conversation at work, he would take a moment to feel genuinely proud of that accomplishment. When he watched an entire English YouTube video without subtitles, he would share that success with a supportive friend who was also learning English. The celebration practice also helped Olivier develop a more realistic and encouraging perspective on the learning process. He began to understand that language learning isn't a linear journey from ignorance to perfection. It's a gradual, incremental process where small improvements accumulate over time to create dramatic transformation. By celebrating the small improvements, he was acknowledging and reinforcing the actual process of how languages are learned. One of the most beautiful aspects of Olivier's celebration practice was how it changed his daily relationship with English. Instead of approaching English interactions with anxiety about potential mistakes or failures, he began approaching them with curiosity about potential victories. This positive anticipation made English encounters more enjoyable and less stressful, which actually improved his performance because he was more relaxed and confident. Olivier also discovered that celebrating small wins made him more observant of his own progress. When you're looking for successes to celebrate, you become much more aware of the successful moments that you might otherwise overlook. He started noticing when English words came to mind quickly, when his pronunciation felt smooth and natural, when his listening comprehension was effortless, and when his confidence was high. This increased awareness created a positive feedback loop that accelerated his improvement. The celebration practice extended to Olivier's mistakes as well, but in a different way. Instead of beating himself up when he made errors, he started celebrating the courage it took to try expressing complex ideas, the learning opportunity that mistakes provided, and the evidence that he was pushing himself beyond his comfort zone. He reframed mistakes from failures into proof of his commitment to growth and improvement. After several months of consistent celebration, Olivier noticed that his overall attitude toward English learning had transformed completely. What had once felt like a struggle against his own inadequacy now felt like an exciting journey of discovery and accomplishment. He looked forward to English encounters, because each one was an opportunity for another small victory to celebrate. This enthusiasm made learning more effective because positive emotions enhance memory and retention. Olivier shared his celebration approach with other English learners in his community, and the impact was remarkable. When people started acknowledging and celebrating their small English successes, their motivation increased dramatically. They began to see themselves as successful English users rather than failed English students. This identity shift was powerful and lasting, creating more confidence and willingness to continue improving. The celebration practice also helped Olivier appreciate the journey, rather than fixating only on the destination. Instead of constantly thinking about how far he still had to go to reach perfect fluency, he began enjoying and valuing each step of progress along the way. This present moment appreciation made the entire learning experience more satisfying and sustainable. What moved me most about Olivier's story was how celebrating his English victories began to influence other areas of his life. He started acknowledging his successes at work, in his relationships, and in his personal projects. The practice of recognizing and celebrating progress became a life skill that enhanced his overall well-being and self-confidence. English learning had taught him how to be kinder and more encouraging to himself in all areas of life. Olivier told me that the celebration practice taught him something profound about the nature of achievement and progress. He realized that extraordinary accomplishments are built from thousands of small victories that most people never acknowledge or appreciate. By celebrating the small wins in his English journey, he was training himself to recognize and value the incremental progress that creates all meaningful change in life. Today, I want you to think about your own English journey with the same appreciation and recognition that Olivier learned to give himself. What English victory can you celebrate from today, this week, or this month? What progress have you made that deserves acknowledgement rather than criticism? You are doing better than you think, and every step forward is worth celebrating. Before we finish today, I want you to choose one tip from this episode that resonates with you the most. Just one. Start applying it this week. Remember, fluency isn't about speaking perfectly. It's about communicating your thoughts and connecting with others. You have everything you need to succeed. Keep practicing, keep believing in yourself, and I'll see you in the next episode of the English Talk Community. As we reach the end of our time together today, I want you to take a moment to reflect on everything we've discussed. We've covered so many different approaches to improving your English fluency, from overcoming fear and starting small, to using technology and creating daily habits. We've talked about the power of self-talk, the importance of celebrating small victories, and the transformation that comes from using English in real situations. Each of these strategies has the potential to change your English journey in profound ways. But here's what I've learned from working with thousands of English learners over the years. The most successful people aren't the ones who try to implement every technique at once. The most successful people are the ones who choose one approach that feels right for them, commit to it completely, and practice it consistently until it becomes a natural part of their lives. Then, once that habit is established and working well, they add another technique and then another. I want you to trust your instincts about which tip from today's episode spoke to you most clearly. Maybe it was Maria's story about overcoming fear that reminded you of your own struggles with speaking anxiety. Maybe it was Pierre's approach of starting small with simple daily descriptions that felt manageable and encouraging. Perhaps it was Anna's discovery of self-talk that excited you because you realized you could practice English even when you're alone. Or maybe it was Elena's technique of thinking in pictures instead of translating that felt like the missing piece you've been looking for. Whatever resonated most strongly with you, that's your starting point. That's your invitation to take action this week. Not next month when you have more time, not after you finish your current course or program, but this week. Today, if possible. The technique that spoke to you most clearly is probably the one that addresses your biggest current challenge or matches your learning style most naturally. If you choose to start with self-talk like Anna did, begin today by narrating just one simple activity in English. If you're inspired by the daily challenge approach that worked so well for Marcus, commit to creating one English sentence every day about your real experiences. If Sophia's listen and repeat method appeals to you, find one short English clip today and practice matching its rhythm and flow. If Diego's real-world application approach excites you, look for one small opportunity this week to use English in an authentic situation. The key is to start immediately with something specific and manageable. Don't wait until you feel completely ready or until you have the perfect plan. Readiness comes from action, not from preparation. Confidence comes from experience, not from study. Fluency comes from using English, not from learning about English. Every single person whose story I shared with you today started exactly where you are right now, with the same doubts, the same fears, and the same dreams. What made the difference for each of them wasn't that they were naturally gifted or that they had special advantages. What made the difference was that they took action despite their fears. They continued practicing despite their mistakes, and they believed in their ability to improve even when progress felt slow. They chose progress over perfection, consistency over intensity, and courage over comfort. I also want you to remember that your English journey is unique to you. Don't compare your progress to anyone else's timeline or achievements. Don't measure your success against native speaker standards or against the highlight reels you see on social media. Measure your success against where you were yesterday, last week, last month. Celebrate the moments when English feels a little easier, when understanding comes a little quicker, when expressing yourself feels a little more natural. You are part of a global community of people who are brave enough to learn new languages, curious enough to explore different cultures, and determined enough to persist through challenges. Every time you choose to practice English, every time you push yourself beyond your comfort zone, every time you continue despite setbacks, you're demonstrating qualities that will serve you well in every area of your life. The English skills you're building are just the beginning. You're also developing resilience, confidence, cultural awareness, and the ability to connect with people from all over the world. You're expanding your perspective, increasing your opportunities, and proving to yourself that you can achieve difficult goals through consistent effort and patience. As you move forward from today's episode, carry with you the knowledge that fluent English is not just possible for you, it's inevitable if you keep showing up for yourself. Every person whose story I shared today is proof that regular people with busy lives, fears, and limitations can transform their English abilities through simple, consistent actions. You have everything you need within you already. You have curiosity, determination, and the willingness to learn and grow. Your English fluency journey starts with the next choice you make. Choose one technique from today that resonated with you. Choose to take action this week. Choose to be patient with yourself while staying committed to your growth. Choose to celebrate your progress along the way. Choose to believe in your ability to become the confident English speaker you want to be. Remember, I'm here with you in this community, cheering you on, believing in your potential, and excited to be part of your English journey. You've got this, and I can't wait to hear about the progress you're going to make.